In 1939, the United States Navy chose a synthetic insulation patented just 1 year earlier over a natural bark that had insulated Roman aqueducts, European cathedrals, and Frank Lloyd Wright's Falling Water. That single procurement decision shaped how 80 million American homes would be built for the next 80 years. The walls of most American houses today still contain the consequence of that choice. A cork oak in the Alentejo region of Portugal stands in sharp contrast to the industrial output that would later define American construction. This tree, Quercus suber, can live for 3 centuries, yielding its thick, resilient bark every 9 to 12 years. Each harvest leaves the tree unharmed and the bark regrows, a regenerative cycle unmatched by any industrial crop. Over its lifetime, a single cork oak can be stripped as many as 16 times, storing carbon both in its living tissue and in every slab of harvested bark. Forest surveys across Portugal and Spain document more than 2 million hectares of these groves, each hectare drawing down roughly 2 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere every year. The result is a landscape that acts as a permanent carbon sink, with the harvested cork itself locking away carbon for as long as it remains in use. This natural chemistry is built on suberin, a complex, waxy polymer that fortifies each cell of the bark. Suberin makes cork elastic, impermeable, and resistant to decay. It is the reason cork floats, insulates, and rebounds. Roman engineers recognized these properties 2,000 years ago. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century, described how cork bark was pressed into the joints of aqueducts to create watertight seals that would not deform even after years submerged. Archaeological finds in the Iberian Peninsula have uncovered cork plugs still intact, wedged in ancient Roman conduits. The value of cork did not escape medieval builders. Moorish foresters in Al-Andalus planted cork oak along the margins of cultivated land, their royal decrees offering tax relief to those who maintained the groves. In Lisbon, the Gremio dos Corticheiros, the Cork Workers Guild, recorded trade ledgers and apprenticeship logs from the 13th through the 15th centuries. These records, still cited in municipal archives, show cork exported as far as northern Europe, prized for its ability to regulate temperature and dampen sound in wine cellars, ships, and storied halls. The Guild's ledgers demanded that every finished panel meet strict standards of impermeability and flexibility, a medieval echo of modern performance metrics. By the time the industrial era arrived, the legitimacy of cork was already established by centuries of continuous use. The material's reputation was not a relic of folklore, but the product of a long, documented lineage, one that joined natural science with craft tradition. Builders trusted cork because it performed, not because it was new. The bark's chemistry, the regenerative cycle of the tree, and the records of Roman and medieval institutions all converged to prove that cork's superiority was known, measured, and relied upon long before the first synthetic insulation ever left a factory floor. Thomas Armstrong's name became synonymous with industrial cork in the United States by the turn of the 20th century. What began as a 2-man cork-cutting shop in Pittsburgh in 1860 had, by 1891, produced a patent for expanded cork, a process that used heat and the bark's own suberin to create rigid, lightweight boards. Armstrong's innovation, filed at the U.S. Patent Office and chronicled in chemical journals of the era, set the stage for a new class of insulation. Within a decade, Armstrong corkboard lined the operating theaters of the Mayo Clinic and the walls of the White House's West Wing. Procurement ledgers from 1904 and 1905 list Armstrong as the supplier, and building records from Chicago's Congregational Church in 1908 confirm cork's presence in high-profile architecture. By 1940, the United States was importing nearly half of the world's cork supply, mostly from Portugal, Spain, and Algeria. Department of Commerce trade reports from that year show cork accounted for over 50% of the total value of all imported bark-derived insulation materials. The material was not just for bottle caps and flooring, it was essential for gaskets in military equipment. acoustic panels in bombers, and thermal shields in naval vessels. The Department of Commerce's October 1941 bulletin, Cork Goes to War, labeled cork a critical material and warned that few satisfactory substitutes had been found. Federal records document the allocation of over 8 million cubic feet of expanded cork to the Navy and Army between 1940 and 1944. But the system was fragile. In May 1940, a fire at the Crown Cork and Seal plant in Baltimore destroyed $500,000 worth of baled cork. The incident triggered an FBI investigation, with agents probing for sabotage at a time when German U-boats threatened Atlantic shipping lanes. Although the FBI closed the case as accidental, the fire was cited in War Production Board memos as evidence of supply vulnerability. The government's response was swift. Cork was placed under critical material controls, imports were rationed, and military procurement offices began to search for alternatives. The strain of war exposed the limits of a material that, until then, had been considered irreplaceable. Commerce Department memoranda and internal Armstrong reports from the early 1940s document mounting concern as supply chains faltered. The vulnerability was not technical. Cork's R-value, fire resistance, and acoustic performance remained unmatched, but the problem was logistical and political. The stage was set for a new material to enter, not because it performed better, but because the machinery of procurement and monopoly would soon decide what filled the walls of American homes. In June 1949, the United States District Court issued a consent decree against Owens Corning, the nation's dominant fiberglass producer. The Department of Justice's antitrust action forced the company to license its patents to competitors, a rare intervention that exposed just how far Owens Corning's influence had reached. The decree did not end the company's grip on the market. Instead, it laid the groundwork for a new phase of control, one built on branding, builder education, and regulatory capture rather than outright monopoly. By 1957, Owens Corning launched the Comfort Conditioned Home campaign, a national blitz that reframed insulation as a lifestyle upgrade. Print ads and closed-circuit television spots promised homeowners a new era of comfort, linking fiberglass not only to warmth and efficiency, but to modernity itself. The company's marketing materials, archived in the corporate records, show a deliberate strategy. Saturate the public with images of pink bats, train contractors in the use of fiberglass, and position the product as the only rational choice for post-war America. Internal memos from the era reveal a coordinated effort to embed fiberglass specifications into builder training programs and trade publications. The campaign's success was cemented in 1965 when the U.S. Building Code introduced a mandatory insulation standard for residential construction. The code text, prepared by model code authors with direct ties to industry, listed fiberglass bats as the reference material for compliance. While the language allowed other approved insulation, the effect was clear. Cork, once the gold standard, was now relegated to the margins. Regulatory preference, not performance, defined what filled the walls of American homes. Owens Corning's playbook, legal maneuvering, mass media saturation, and code-writing influence locked in a synthetic future, while Cork's legacy was quietly erased from the mainstream. Measured side by side, expanded cork and fiberglass insulation reveal a stark contrast in both performance and safety. Laboratory tests consistently report expanded cork's R-value between 3.6 and 4.2 per inch, while typical fiberglass bats register lower, between 2.9 and 3.8. This difference means that inch for inch, cork delivers superior thermal resistance, a fact documented in engineering handbooks and confirmed by ASTM and EN testing standards. But thermal performance is only the beginning of the story. The question of toxicity brings the stakes into sharper focus. For decades, American fiberglass insulation relied on phenol formaldehyde binders. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, an authority in global health, classifies formaldehyde as a Group 1 carcinogen, directly linking it to human cancer risk. Industry health reports and indoor air quality studies have traced elevated levels of formaldehyde off-gassing in newly insulated homes, with concentrations often exceeding recommended exposure limits for months after installation. It was not until 2015, after mounting pressure from advocacy groups and medical researchers, that Owens Corning announced the removal of formaldehyde from its residential insulation products. For nearly 60 years, American homes were filled with a material whose binder chemistry was flagged by global health agencies as hazardous. Durability tells a different story. Expanded cork, bound by its own suberin polymer, resists moisture, retains its shape, and maintains its R value for decades. Test panels from the mid-20th century show little degradation after 50 years in service. Fiberglass, in contrast, is prone to settling, water absorption, and binder breakdown, especially in humid or poorly ventilated spaces. Over time, this leads to sagging batts, reduced thermal efficiency, and increased risk of mold. The numbers are clear. Cork outperforms on every metric that matters to human health, building efficiency and environmental impact. Yet the walls of most American homes remain filled with the legacy of wartime procurement and corporate strategy, a synthetic solution that never matched the natural standard it replaced. Today, American homes still lock in fiberglass, despite cork's superior R value, fire safety, sound control, and carbon negativity, all documented in the record. The walls that surround us reflect not material science, but policy and profit. Until that changes, the cost remains quietly built into every room.